Hello Lighthouse Church, my name is Bryn. For those of you that don't know me, I am the youngest son of Sally and Andrew Frere-Smith. And before I even get started on sharing my story with you today, I just want to say a big thank you, a heartfelt thank you from me to you for so welcoming my mum and dad into your community. They have really enjoyed being part of Lighthouse Church since they joined a couple of years ago. And during this coronavirus lockdown, I'm actually living with my parents again up here in Norfolk. So knowing that they are happy makes my life terribly easier. So a heartfelt thank you from me to you. Ian has asked me to share a little bit about my testimony with you today. And he's asked if I could try and keep it to around 5 minutes, which is a task I'm fairly confident I will fail. But I'm going to try. So in order to marshal my time, I have an egg timer. And perhaps I'll try and stay somewhere close to that target. It's set. Perhaps I should start. About 6 years ago, I left the police force. So I was, for no particular scandalous reasons, you'll be pleased to hear, but I had worked in Norfolk Police for 4 years as a uniform response officer. Then I transferred to the Met, where I worked as a surveillance officer. And I just grew very frustrated with the organisation, the bureaucracy, the way that society had seemed to have given up on the police a little bit, which is not dissimilar to the scenario that we're facing today in many ways. And I just found it a really hard place to be and to work. And there was a lot of injustice that took place within that organisation. So I left. And I left all of a sudden. I sat down at my desk one day and typed out my resignation. And a few weeks later, I was on a plane to Mexico, where I spent 3 months wandering up and down Mexico and focusing around the beaches at the south of the country and just sort of petitioning the Lord, going, Lord, I always felt that my career was in the police, or at the very least pursuing justice, but it felt so right to leave, and I don't know where to go from here. I think I wanted the Lord to give me a roadmap of directions. And I didn't get that. But I did feel I heard from the Lord once, quite palpably on that trip. And I'd just been to a church in a place called San Cristobal, and I was walking down the hill on my own with my backpack, and I really felt I had an intimate experience with what I believed to be the Lord. And I felt him say, Bryn, I just want you to love me. And I've never had an experience like it before or after. It was really powerful for me, and I was writing it down in my journal and trying to focus on it and meditate on it and think, well, that's great, Lord, but what does that mean? How do I love you? So I came back from Mexico and started a security company. I thought, well, what is in my hands? What do I know? Well, the one thing I knew was policing and security. So I started a security company with a friend in Norfolk, actually, and I think it went down on record as being the least successful security company in the history of the world, perhaps. So after a year or so of trying and failing to get that to work, I returned to London and I ended up working as a bodyguard. I got a job as a bodyguard for a royal family from the Middle East, and then spent the next 4 or 5 years working in different close protection roles as a bodyguard for different high-profile individuals and high-net-worth individuals. And it was a remarkable period of my life. I ended up working as a security advisor at a venture capital firm in Mayfair. And after 12 months there, I just felt a bit of a nudge from the Lord. And the question I was asking myself was, am I loving God here? And if I am, how? But my heart still wanted to be connected to the issue of pursuing justice. So I left my job without a cargo net to jump into. And I went and spent some time with my pastor, and we sat down and went through the Sermon on the Mount together and talked and prayed. And he challenged me, Bryn, what would you do if you could do anything? If you could take away the restrictions of salary, the need to have an income and pay rent, what would you choose to do? And I remembered an organisation called International Justice Mission. I'd been paying a direct debit to them for several years, and I thought I'd probably go and work for them. And they're a Christian organisation, but they're also the largest anti-slavery agency in the world. So I went and volunteered for them, and I was sent to the Dominican Republic to work as an investigator. So I spent 12 months in the Dominican Republic working as an investigator, and my role was to go undercover on a project that was specifically focusing on looking for children that had ended up in the sex industry. And there is a real problem in the Dominican Republic with prostitution. It's extremely high levels there. And there are children there. Now, I don't say they're working because I don't believe a child can have agency in coming to that conclusion, coming to making a decision to end up in the sex industry. And if there are any cases where a child had been exploited, was being coerced or forced or trafficked in some way, well, then we had a case and we would build an investigation around that. 6 months into my time there, I met a child who had been trafficked by her parents, and she had been sold by mum and dad to men in the community in exchange for money and drugs. And she was 14, and she'd just lived a life of suffering. And we were involved in an investigation that found the proof to release her from that situation, to arrest her parents and those that had been exploiting her and abusing her. And I was involved in that. When we took this young girl away, she spoke to my colleague, not me, because as an investigator, you don't get to kick the door down, sweep the child up, as many people perhaps think. It's not glamorous. You just stand back and you point. But my colleagues went in, and as they removed this child, she asked for her blue teddy bear. So we had to go back and get that for her. And it was a moment in time that stayed with me and has remained with me forever. It will remain with me forever. And I saw this blue ragdoll teddy bear sat on her lap in the back of the car, and that was the only item of value she had. And it broke my heart. 12 months before, I was going around Harrods Toy Kingdom with a prince from the Middle East, and he was told, whatever the boy touches, we will buy. So he was just going around Toy Kingdom pushing things off the shelf. They were getting swept up, stuck into baskets, and sent to the hotel. Fast forward 12 months, the only thing this girl has of any value to her was a ragdoll blue teddy bear. After that experience, I came home at Christmas and I raised some money to go back to the Dominican Republic and buy a load of nice, white, fresh, clean teddy bears that are still being given out now after situations of police operations and rescues. But I also had some money to get involved in the more complicated life needs of our survivors. And that experience for me was so powerful, just being able to help, just being able to be a link in the chain to provide for the needs that these children had, be them educational, be them healthcare, their life needs. I thought, I wonder at the end of this year whether I can do this more scalably. So when I returned from that experience with International Justice Mission, I started a coffee company. The coffee company is called Blue Bear Coffee Company. We sell specialty coffee. We pay our farmers last year 156% higher than the fair trade rate, because we want to make sure no one's being exploited in our supply chain. But then all of the profits we make, we give to organisations, including IJM, that are fighting human trafficking and caring for survivors. So that's what I'm doing with my life. Now I also work for an anti-trafficking agency called Justice and Care. And I'm conscious of not turning this into a sermon because it's just my story. But if I could share what the Lord has been saying to me over this time, it would surround two main themes. And the first of those is straight from the book of Matthew, where it says, whatever you do for the least of these brothers and sisters, you do also for me. And that, I think, if I've tried to outwork that mandate from the Lord, Bryn, I just want you to love me. And I've tried to find what's the literal manifestation of that. Perhaps the closest I've got is love the least. If you want to love me, love the least. And as long as my life is responding to that in some way, then I must be achieving that objective. The other thing I wanted to share was a verse that stood out to me recently in Ecclesiastes 11, and it says, whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. And I think a big lesson for me has been, just do it. Just go out and do it. If it's on your heart, if you've asked for the Lord's involvement, if you've given it to him, if you've asked for his blessing, just go out and do it. Don't wait for the perfect time. There's no better time than now to get involved. So those are the only things I would share that I feel that have been big things that I'm trying to work through in my walk with the Lord. And I know I've overrun. Amazingly, my ringer hasn't gone off. So that's that doesn't achieve its purpose, does it? I thank you for giving me this opportunity to share, even very, very briefly, my story, and have a blessed day. Thank you.